good Monday, and welcome into Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I am Sam Sprunger, as always, joined by Tony Hollinsworth. Tony, welcome to Monday.
Welcome to Monday. It's supposed to be a good day, right? I mean, hey, I finished my last class. I officially have an associate's degree as of tomorrow. So I mean,
fantastic. Congrats.
I got my education. I'm on paper. I'm smart, at least a quarter of the way smart.
At least it says, the piece of paper says you're smart.
I can't read that piece of paper, but it says on there that I'm smart.
And if there are any colors, you definitely can't see it.
No, and they probably would too. They'd color code it. Be like, if you can read these colors, this is what this secret message means.
A lot going on in the Big Ten. We've got a bunch happening with the men's basketball season, but there was some football news going on. What's going on in Columbus, Tony? Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator of the national champion Buckeyes, leaves for the NFL to take the Raiders offensive coordinator position. What's going on in Columbus?
I don't know. Did you ever see the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Yeah.
Like when Will Smith is just standing in the empty locker room. I saw a meme where not the
empty house,
empty living room. Yeah. Empty house. And it's Ryan Day with his national title just sitting in there, and all the coordinators and whatnot have left. It does kind of make you wonder, and it, at least from somebody who follows the NFL pretty regularly too, I'm really surprised because there was actually a better spot that Chip Kelly could have gone to, because he could have gone to Houston to become their offensive coordinator, and then you at least get to work with another Ohio State quarterback by the name of CJ Stroud, and instead you go. He does, but instead you go to the Raiders, where you have the opportunity to work with the mullet-mustached Minshew Mania or Aiden O'Connell, Farva Jr.
Well, it very well could be the fact that he's friends with Pete Carroll. Might be, maybe that fits. Maybe he doesn't know DeMeco Ryans that well, and I don't know. I really don't know.
He's also getting paid an average of $6 million per year. He's now the NFL's highest paid coordinator per Albert Breer.
There we go. That would be why and I guess, when you said that, is it something to do with, and this is the first time that I've ever questioned, because honestly, A, I didn't care, and B, it was a little bit of, it seems like you guys are being unfair. Anyways, is this Ryan Day's problem? Like, is it because he can't get along with these coordinators?
I don't know if it's necessarily he can't get along with them. Now, obviously, as the reports have come out more and more, there apparently was a rift between him and Jim Knowles. Like, yes. That has definitely come out.
Now, that was going to be my next point.
I say, now maybe in the coming weeks we may hear something about Chip Kelly, but they supposedly had a long-lasting relationship from when Ryan Day was a player and Chip Kelly was his coach. Now, I don't know if that may still be true or not, but I guess here's the other thing too. When you look at both of them, I mean, both of them are now the highest paid coordinators wherever they went. Jim Knowles is for Penn State in college, and then obviously Chip Kelly went back to the pros because you can make significantly more money. So I don't necessarily know if it's Ryan Day or if it's just a matter of, Ohio State and kind of looking at it. You tell me what you think. It almost seems like this year was one of those, we are in a win now mentality. We're going to put it all out on the table, and we're going to go out and try to win a championship to at least say that we've won one. And then I'm not going to say they're going to fall into irrelevance, but I could very easily see them maybe having an 8 to 9 win season this coming year, with a lot of the talent having to move on just from graduation. What are they going to look like at quarterback? Obviously, we talked about Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson leaving, so they're going to need a new running back room as well. I mean, their offensive line coach has left, now their offense and defensive coordinator. So I think there's going to be turbulent times at Ohio State, but it does kind of make you wonder why some of these guys with how good you are, with how well you built this team, and the fact that you took them to a national title, when I'm not going to say everybody wrote them off, but I don't think it was as expected, at least post Michigan game. Nobody said, "Oh man, this Ohio State team's dangerous." Everybody's like, "Yeah, they're in the playoffs. Let's see what happens when they have to face somebody like Tennessee." And then obviously they caught fire, and the whole world was alerted to the Ohio State Buckeyes for this year.
I don't know, because Jim Knowles, what I've heard about Jim Knowles is he wanted to stay, potentially wanted to stay at Ohio State, but was negotiating, and told various people that he wanted to get a a renegotiate or whatever. Was told, you've been well compensated. Either sign the current deal that is offered, or don't bother coming to the celebration. And that was when Knowles said, "You know what? I can go to Penn State and and feel wanted in Happy Valley, in Happy Valley." And it just that's why I brought the question up, because now a week later your OC leaves. Now granted, he's going to the NFL. Many would see that as a step up from where he was at with Ohio State, but at the same point, it doesn't seem like it's maybe not rainbows and unicorns there in Columbus, because did somebody get full of himself?
It does kind of make you wonder, and it does make you wonder too a little bit there of, like we talked about after the Michigan game, there was a lot of turmoil happening in Columbus post Michigan, and there's probably a lot of heads being called. Obviously, the two biggest that were on the chopping block was Day and Kelly. I think Knowles was the only one that was safe, and I do kind of wonder. And again, this is purely speculation. There's no facts behind this.
You have no facts behind it, right?
Correct. I do kind of wonder if maybe Ryan Day and Chip Kelly
done that in this show, doing that, that, right?
I know they're combined. They are one.
Not anymore.
It does kind of make me wonder if maybe Ryan Day didn't take a little bit of offense to that. Like, wait a minute, why is my job being on the line when when it is a collaborative effort? Jim lost this game just as much as we did, but also at the same time, even as a fan's perspective, it's like, yeah, but you only gave up over 30 points once, and that was to an Oregon team in Oregon, and then against your most hated rival that you're receiving all this skepticism from. His defense only allowed him 13 points. You can't really ask much more from him as far as a defensive defensive standard goes. So that does make me kind of wonder if maybe it wasn't a little bit of that, and then, like you said, if it wasn't kind of full of themselves, because you have to look at Ohio State, the brand, the caliber of players they're able to bring in, and at the end of the day, it is a business too. If you're at Ohio State, you're going to be one of the most sought after coordinators or coaches almost regardless, just because of how well Ohio State usually does, over the years. So it does make you wonder of kind of what has happened behind closed doors. And I'm going to throw this out there. It might be a little bit of a hot take, but did Ryan Day potentially learn this from his predecessor? Because we know there was some issues with Urban Meyer and coaching staffs and whatnot before. Is it just one of those, Urban said, "You remind me of me, you take over," and Ryan's like, "Yeah, let's do it"?
Wow. So you think maybe, not that he had influence recently, currently, but he has a little bit of an imprint on this happening because, hey, you're like me, and you don't let nobody take your glory from you or whatever.
Well, I mean, you think about it. You look at how Urban Meyer left Ohio State. He left because of the scandal, because of one of his coaches having a domestic issue with with his wife, and supposedly Urban wasn't aware of it. Again, I don't know how true or how factual that is. And it ultimately led to, hey, you either need to resign or this is going to get ugly. And you think about how much Urban cares about Ohio State. Like, you look at all the colleges he's ever coached at, the one he cared about the most is Ohio State, because he still references and he still likes to go to Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
He immediately was enamored and embraced Ohio State culture and whatnot. So if you're having to leave the job that you love so much and you care about it, why wouldn't you want to put it in somebody's hands that you're like, this person is going to care for it and love it just as much as I am? I don't want to
Or
put it in
just like I do.
Or just like I do. I don't want to put it in somebody's hands who, you're maybe a little too free spirited. You kind of, buck up against the system, or you don't do it like how I do it. This guy is going to do it exactly like how I would have.
Yeah, maybe. It's definitely interesting to see the progression, and do they hire from within? Do they try to make another big splash? I personally think they're going to hire from within, or at least a lower profile for each coordinator, just because they may go into not a rebuild, but more of a, we're reloading, and why not, with all this turnover on our roster, why not do a little bit of setting our own coordinators onto the right path? And then if in 2 years, when I still haven't beaten Michigan, they're going to fire me anyways, all these guys will go with me, or
right.
whatever.
I do kind of wonder, because I think if there is one that I think would make Ohio State fans happy, as well as it would be well-deserved, I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe doesn't promote Brian Hartline from just wide receivers coach to the OC. Because, you look at all the wide receiver talent he's had and he's helped put into the NFL as far as first-round draft picks go. He's done phenomenal work. Like we talked about with Emeka Ibuka, we both feel like he doesn't really get the recognition that, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, that all of them got while they were there at Ohio State. So, to me, that would probably make the most sense, kind of elevate him up. And there's been a lot of rumors anyway that people were potentially debating on trying to maybe pluck him and see if they could pull him from Ohio State to make them their offensive coordinator. So if I'm Ryan Day, like you said, even if you are still trying to save your job, why don't you put the best man, at least that you have internally, on the roster to, again, kind of help keep your guys there.
Keep them on your staff, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why not giving that promotion and that pay bump? Because, again, there might be some loyalty there, because, look how long he's been there. He's stayed there.
I do believe he went
very
to school.
Easily could have. I think he did too. If I remember correctly, I think he did. So, he's got loyalty to Columbus. The other guys, not as much. But
I think it's going to probably be some within. So I wouldn't think wouldn't bat an eye at Hartline being named the OC defensive coordinator. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a lesser known name be the one that they go with for that as well. And for their line coach, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. I'd say that's kind of one of those. It's like, and here's the thing too, because we've noticed it with coordinators, and it's kind of becoming more of a more of a prolific event with former players coming back and then moving into these coaching positions and whatnot. Obviously, Ohio State, they have Hartline and they have James Laurinaitis, who NFL wise, he had a very solid and great career. He wasn't exactly the biggest name as far as linebacker goes, but he was still successful. And another Ohio State Buckeye graduate comes back and is the, I believe, linebackers coach. So again, would be hard to move that up. It's kind of already with the trend in both college and pros anyway, is a lot of these former players getting to come back. They want to be coaches, and a lot of them are actually having pretty good success, because I think for a lot of these kids, the younger the coaches are, even if it's within the last 10, 15 years, it's easier to relate to you, especially when it comes to playing the game, as compared to a guy like, oh yeah, I played, but I played, like 50 years ago, when you could basically, throw your whole head and body into somebody's left arm and try to obliterate it. But, hey.
Well, we're going to go ahead. We're going to take a break for the audio podcast. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about, Tony, something that hasn't happened since November 26th. That's what I'm going to tease that for the audio listeners. So after these messages, we'll talk about that. You're listening to Big Talk on the Believe and Lounge Sports Network. Okay, we're back. Tony, we're going to switch to Big Ten basketball. And November 26th, 2024 in Maui is the last time that the Michigan State Spartans had lost until Saturday, when the USC Trojans just basically tip to final buzzer and beat the Spartans 70-64 in LA to hand Michigan State their first loss of the Big Ten season. Tony, this finally gives other teams, and yes, I'm a Purdue fan, and it gives Purdue, but it gives every other team in the Big Ten that much more hope that maybe they can make a run and maybe try to steal that title away.
Yeah, and it's crazy too when I looked at Michigan State's schedule. Up until Saturday, their only two losses were in the month of November, on the 12th and on the 26th, to Kansas and to Memphis, of all teams, believe it or not. And it is crazy when you look at the score. Michigan State never even tied it. They never tied. They never had the lead. Nothing. It was USC from the get-go. And I don't know if maybe this was one of those. It was kind of a trap game. Maybe Michigan State took them for granted. They first saw it and they're like, yeah, USC sitting there. They're 12-8. They're 4-5 in the conference. We're kind of riding this hot streak. We should be able to come in and beat them. And then, they get punched in the mouth and it's, whoa, wait a minute. We weren't ready for this yet. We didn't want that smoke. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It's one of those, it's going to happen type of deal. We saw, heck, even look last year, Purdue had a couple that just kind of got away from him. It's like, oh, wow. So you are human in a sense, as far as, your overall team-esque, you're a human. But I think it does open it up, at least for Purdue. Now, I know looking at the standings, Michigan State is still 1. Purdue is technically a half game back. Michigan sitting there 1 game behind. I still don't think that that's going to come to fruition, but
they play Michigan State twice, though.
They do. They
do have them twice left on the schedule.
And then, you've got Maryland, UCLA, and Wisconsin all tied after that with 2.5 games behind, and all sitting there at 7-4 in the conference. So, I mean, it does open it up. But, like I said before, even before Michigan State lost, when we looked at the top 3 of Michigan State, Purdue, and Michigan, to me, it's still Michigan and Purdue's race. I mean,
sure.
If Michigan sneaks in there, I will be incredibly surprised. But I don't necessarily know, between the experience, between the overall talent, if they would be able to match with Purdue and Michigan State in order to claim that title.
Well, I'm looking at Michigan State's schedule remaining, and they play at Pauley Pavilion against UCLA tomorrow on the 4th. Then they host number 16 Oregon, maybe not number 16 at that point, because they did lose at home to Nebraska. Then they play host to IU, who played a better game on Friday than against Purdue than they had played. They'd played a good game against Maryland prior to the Purdue game, but they lost both of those games. But they've been playing a little bit better, so that may be a little bit different. But then they have to travel to Illinois. Illinois can score points, and they're really good. Then they host number 10 Purdue. Then they are at Michigan, at Maryland, host Wisconsin, have to go to Iowa. Iowa's only lost 1 game at home up to this point. They that's it. And then they host Michigan to round out the season. Their schedule was backloaded with a ton of tough games for them.
Yeah, which is kind of the opposite from what we've been used to. And I mean, especially from what we've been used to over the last few years. I mean, realistically, the toughest two opponents that Michigan State had to face, at least at the beginning part of their schedule, was Kansas, where they ended up losing by 8 to them in the third game this season. And then at the time, they beat number 12 North Carolina 94-91, which,
and unfortunately, North Carolina is not good.
Right. So that win doesn't look as impressive anymore.
Right.
And don't get it twisted. I mean, there's still some very tough opponents, and it's kind of the same with the USC thing. I still wouldn't take any of those teams lightly. I think you have a better shot against Oregon than probably what would have been initially thought, especially with how Oregon has kind of dropped. They've lost 4 out of their last 5 games. Michigan State has been on a incredible run and whatnot. Since doing that, like you said, IU has played better, but I think they're pretty vulnerable. Obviously Illinois can put up points, and so I feel like anything's really possible. They did beat Illinois in the first matchup, at least in the Breslin Center, by 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously you've got Purdue just hanging around right after that. So I don't think it's impossible. Like you said, they've definitely got a tougher schedule, but I'll say this too, at least when you first looked at this prior to the season starting, when you looked at the rest of their schedule, I'll be honest, the only 3 teams, at least at the end of that I would have honestly been worried about prior to anything that's happened this season would have been Illinois, Purdue, and Wisconsin. All the other ones, I'm not super worried. Now, they've all had their own good respective seasons. Obviously, Michigan has done a complete and total 180 from what we saw, but none of them really kind of scared me initially. And again, I'm not saying that Michigan State's going to stomp them or sweep them, but I'm not super, super worried.
Yeah, it's looking at their schedule, looking at the standings, I'm gonna say that and for Purdue, they've got a decently difficult schedule as well coming up as well. I mean, they're at Iowa tomorrow. Then they host USC, and I tell you what, Desmond Claude is a man. He's a beast.
Yep.
What he did against Michigan State really set the tone for that wire-to-wire win for the Trojans. Then Purdue's got to go to Chrysler. Then they host Wisconsin. Then they go to Michigan State. Then they go to IU. Then they host UCLA. And, oh, by the way, they wrap up the season at Illinois. So it's a pretty difficult rest of the schedule for Purdue as well. Now, that's not to say, I mean, we just mentioned, we just saw Nebraska go to Oregon and beat Oregon. Oregon's 5-6 in the Big Ten right now, 16-6 overall. They're gonna make the tournament unless something drastic happens. But we were talking about Oregon and UCLA, and UCLA's kind of turned it around. They're 7-4 right now in the Big Ten. So that game tomorrow at Pauley isn't going to be a real easy one for Michigan State.
No.
But those two teams, UCLA and Oregon, we thought maybe they could be in that top tier to where maybe they contend for the Big Ten. But Michigan State and Purdue in Michigan at this point have really just separated themselves from the rest of the pack.
Yeah. And as of at least right now on Monday, the ESPN predictor for that matchup against Michigan State, they have UCLA as almost a 55% chance of winning against Michigan State as of right now, at least.
Well, and it's I would contest that the second game on that West Coast trip for those teams going east is the easier of the two.
Yeah.
Not making excuses if they lose the first one or if they struggle that first one, but it just seems to me that they have time to stay out there for a few days and really acclimate at least enough to where when they play that second game, it becomes a little easier. Now, the game that I will tell you that maybe they need to kind of worry about, and this is from my experience watching Purdue go out west and come back, is the next game that they play, and that's at home against Oregon.
Yeah.
I talked about this on Believe in Purdue. Is I had an exchange student, a former exchange student, come visit for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd struggled the first couple of days. He stayed for almost 3 weeks, and he really struggled the first couple of days after coming over. And he said, "This isn't what usually happens to me. Usually, it's going home that I struggle the worst."
Right.
And it's because you're losing that time, and you've been on that for long enough that you've gotten acclimated. Now you've lost it, and it really messes with you.
Yep.
So that game against Oregon is going to be a difficult one. Just to acclimate themselves.
Yeah. Now I will say, at least for me, and some of these kids may be in a different situation. At least for me, when I would travel for work from the East Coast to the West Coast, that honestly wasn't that bad. Now, I mean, I was getting up crazy early because, I mean, heck, I'm getting up at like 9 o'clock here Eastern time, and it's 6 a.m. Pacific. It's like, wow, I'm up really early. I'm ready to go. But it was also weird because I always kind of at least internalized that Eastern Standard Time clock. It was like, okay, I know this is the time back home. This is what I have to do. And then when I came back, at least for me, it wasn't that bad. And especially if you're only there for a short amount of time, like Michigan State is. So, not saying everybody's like that, but at least for me, it wasn't that bad coming back home. Now, like for your foreign exchange student, you're going to cross like 30 plus time zones. So that's a pain no matter that's a pain no matter what. There ain't no getting around.
Yeah, well, and he said that it's not normally the bad coming over, it's going back. That's
Right.
That's what I wanted to get at. There is, so if there's any sort of a worry about what's happening it's not even the game against UCLA. Now, you want to win your game against UCLA, don't get me wrong,
Right.
but it's the Oregon game is the one
Yep.
that you probably kind of take a look at and see, is there a letdown? Wisconsin, Mike DeCourcy, I've talked to him, and he said that he wouldn't be surprised if Wisconsin sticks around that third or fourth spot just the rest of the season, and just kind of, he said that they could play a part in disrupting the conference title, and during that disruption, it might fall to them. But they're at 7-4. They're 2.5 games back from Michigan State. Mm-hmm. They're going to need some help. And now, granted, they play Michigan State one more time this year, and actually just one time this year. But they have the opportunity. They're going to need some help, but they have the opportunity to make something happen with that as well. And they play Purdue. So, I mean, like they've got both of those top two teams, and Michigan, I believe, as well. But I know they play Purdue, but I think they've got Michigan one more time at least as well. So they can maybe make a little bit of, like you said, make a little bit of a disruption in that conference championship.
So Wisconsin has left. They have a game tonight against IU. Then they go to Iowa. They go to Purdue. They host Illinois. They host Oregon. Then they host Washington. They go to Michigan State, to Minnesota, and then they end the year hosting Penn State.
Okay, so they're done with Michigan, but still,
correct.
If they do what you think they're going to do, Michigan's going to slough off and fall off anyways.
I think it's very possible.
Anything's possible in this Big Ten.
100%. And again, that's the beauty of, to me, college basketball as a whole.
Yeah.
Is it's any given night, any given day. We've seen number 1 seeds fall, 2 seeds. Everybody can fall. It's possible.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's show. Tony, let everybody know where they can find us.
You can find us on Facebook at Big Talk. That's B1G Talk. You can also find us on Instagram, X, and the TikToks, all at B1G_Talk. Same, but a little different, but still same. You can find us 3 times a week on the All Sports All Plays Network. And you had best believe that Sam is nice enough to upload this wherever you get your podcasts at, including the Believe Podcast Network, as well as the Lounge Sports Network, which falls under the Lounge Media Group, if I could get my tongue to work.
Well, I appreciate that. And thanks so much for joining us on this Monday. We look forward to seeing you in a couple of days. And we'll see you later, Tony.